Okay, what I want to do today is to finish up our discussion of altered states of consciousness. We've seen a whole bunch of these during the last couple of weeks, with a discussion of an altered state of consciousness that everybody experiences all the time, every day, every night, without any effort, without any special training, without any special induction technique or whatever, and that is the dreams that occur when we're asleep. So let's just pick up for a second a little review of mental activity during sleep from the lectures on sleep and dreams. You'll remember that the night's sleep can be roughly divided into two stages. One stage called slow wave sleep, or non-rapid eye movement sleep. And you can see a whole bunch of different kinds of mental activity that are associated with those different kinds of stages: descending stage 1, stage 2, 3, and 4. And then as we cycle into stage REM, we experience these things called dreams and nightmares, by which we've got to have a definition of what a dream is. No better definition has ever been proposed than one by Solomon Snyder, longtime researcher at the NIH. We identify a dream by the appearance of vivid and complex imagery. Doesn't have to be visual imagery, but for most of us, most of the time, it is. Dreams usually have some kind of temporal progression. They're not just static images or static thoughts, but they have a kind of story-like quality to them. For most of us, our dreams are primarily visual. They take place typically in familiar settings, or at least settings that are not particularly strange. The dreamer, him or herself, is usually the central character in a dream. He's doing something, something's happening to her. And the dream content itself is more or less credible. Snyder estimated that fully 90% of the dreams he collected from his subjects concerned events that could actually have happened to somebody. They're not out of the realm of possibility. These dream narratives are fairly coherent. Again, they have this kind of story structure where you can actually understand what somebody experienced through a dream. And with the exception of nightmares, most dreams tend to have kind of flat affect. Now, this is the standard definition of what a dream looks like, and there's really very little disagreement about this. The classic study comparing NREM sleep with REM sleep is by Folks and Schmidt. It's an old study. There's never been a better one. You'll remember what Folks and others had discovered was that even in NREM sleep, there is some kind of mental activity going on, though it's not always characterized as a dream. If you look at what actually meets the Snyderian definition of a dream, about 75%, 74% of reports collected during stage REM would be classified as dreams. Oh no, we're not going to do this. It's why you don't update your computer, I think. And about a quarter of these reports collected in NREM get classified as dreams. Question is, what do we make of this? Okay. There is a massive study published in the 1960s, which some of you might want to go back and read if you're really interested in dreams, by Calvin Hall and a student of his, Van de Kassel, in which they collected a huge number of dreams from college student subjects and identified what the common characteristics of these dreams were. And one of the things they found was that what people dreamt about was pretty much constant across various kinds of cultural and subcultural samples. Men and women dreamt about pretty much the same things. Englishmen and Germans dreamt pretty much about the same kinds of things. Whites and blacks and so on. And that, at least as far as adulthood was concerned, there didn't seem to be any particular changes in content. People dreamed about the same kinds of things in young adulthood as they did when they were older. Now, there were some stable patterns of differences that Hall and Van de Kessel noticed. For example, men tend to have more men in their dreams than women, which might come as a surprise to some people. Women have more of a balance of male and female characters in their dreams. There are more dreams about aggression, broadly construed, than there are about friendliness. More dreams about misfortune than there are about luck. And to the extent that there's emotion, there's more negative emotion than positive emotion, though one of the things that's interesting about these dreams is that there's not that much emotion in them to begin with. Hall and Van de Kessel noted, however, given the limitations of personality assessment at the time, that the content of people's dreams tended to be broadly consistent with their personalities. So somebody who was very extroverted would have more adventuresome, more people-oriented dreams. Somebody who was more neurotic would have more anxiety dreams and so on. So the question that's raised here is that we don't just dream, we dream about things. Our dreams have intentionality. They're about something other than themselves. And what is it that might account for this? The beginnings of modern the dream theory, of course, go back to Sigmund Freud, his 1900 book on the interpretation of dreams. Actually, he was writing on dreams even earlier than that. But it was Freud's conviction that dreams were psychologically significant, that dreams revealed something about the dreamer, and in particular, that they had a special quality in that they revealed something about the dreamer that the dreamer was not aware of in his or her ordinary course of waking life. And basically, what Freud's idea was that dreams were disguised wish fulfillments. And he illustrated this both in the interpretation of dreams and in various lectures by interpreting his own dreams. The interpretation of dreams basically is Freud's own diary, dream diary, if you will, and then he sits back and he tries to figure out what these dreams are about. And the big dream in the interpretation of dreams, the one which he starts the book out with, is what's known as the dream of Irma, in which a patient of Freud's, who is also a member of his social circle, falls ill at a party, and a colleague of Freud's makes the incorrect diagnosis, and Freud makes the correct diagnosis. And what Freud's interpretation of this is that he was in a kind of doctrinal battle with this person about the correct interpretation of certain kinds of symptoms, and that Freud was having a struggle with this guy in his waking life, but in his dream life, he won, okay? That he was victorious over Otto, who was basically a disguised version of Wilhelm Fliess. More prosaically, in one of Freud's later lectures, he reported a dream by his daughter Anna, who subsequently became a distinguished psychotherapist herself, who had what probably was kind of a stomach flu, was sent to bed without her supper, not as punishment, but just so she wouldn't throw it back up. And she had a dream at night in which she cried out for strawberries and omelet and pudding. And Freud says, see, she really wanted this stuff, and she couldn't have it in real life, so she dreamt about it in her dreams. Someday, don't do that. Okay. This kind of analysis gave Freud a kind of vocabulary for thinking about dreams. First, there's his concept of day residue, and he argued that everyday events, especially events from the day before, good, please do this. All right, day residues from events of the day before kind of creep into people's dreams at night. But more important, he distinguished between the manifest content of dreams and the latent content of dreams. The manifest content of the dream is what you tell your partner the next morning at breakfast when you say, oh, I had this tremendous dream last night, and it was about something or other. The latent content for Freud is what the dream's really about. That is the wish that's being fulfilled. And that the transition from the manifest content to the latent content, or actually the reverse, from the latent content, what the dream is really about, to its manifest content that you're consciously aware of, is produced by a series of processes that Freud later elaborated in terms of various defense mechanisms. Displacement, you turn one thing into another. Condensation, you shrink down the events in the dream. Visual or non-symbolic representations of things. And then what he called secondary revision, which is not only is the dream revised when you're having the dream, but the dream gets revised when you're telling the dream, which further enables us to hide what its latent content is. I'll cut it out. There we go. Okay. Now, Freud is famous in some parts unjustly for his theory of dream symbolism, that the actual things in dreams refer to something else. And in most of his writing, Freud talks about how you can't really tell what something in a dream really means unless you engage in this process of free association to reveal what it means to the individual. But that didn't prevent Freud from himself offering a kind of list of common symbols, which are the basis, I think, for those little paperback books you can see in the grocery store, 1,000 dream symbols interpreted and all of that. Freud couldn't resist his own. I think this is more of a marketing ploy than anything else, telling you what various kinds of things meant. We're not going to go through this because there's just no reason for thinking any of it is true, but Freud did have this idea, and I just want to point out that this is a place where, A, Freud gets his reputation for having sex on the brain, and it's also a violation of the basic Freudian prescription that the same thing can mean different things to different people, and you can't assume what something means in the absence of a full psychoanalysis. Okay. In any event, a major product of this analysis of dream activity was Freud's first theory of mental structure, known as the topographical theory of the mind, in which he likened the mind to a compound instrument. That is, like a telescope or a microscope, consisting of a series of lenses that link inputs to outputs. Okay, so the idea here is that here are stimulus inputs which pass through a perceptual system and a bunch of memories, and then get translated into action of various sorts. So you've got motor responses. Here you've got a kind of preconscious bin in the mind, which allows the consciousness to have access to certain kinds of contents. But the general idea, I'm just not going to bother anymore, the general idea here is that there are certain mental contents that are disturbing for whatever reason, and these are rendered unconscious, unavailable to consciousness in what he called the system UCS. Now, Freud didn't stick with this for very long, but it is an early model of the mind that actually has explicit place for conscious, preconscious, and unconscious